Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Geographically. This is cool. So I would say make sure that pretty face is showing.
Yes, true.
They're going to want to see that thing. They're going to want to see that thing, Alan. That face. You good?
Ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see that we are sitting on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a little different than what we usually do. This is part of our Florida trip series, so we're in Florida right now, and we are sitting down with authors, and I'm going to say yoga masters because you guys are so far ahead of me. Dennis and Kathy Lang, it's a pleasure to sit down with you guys. How are you guys doing today?
Thank you
Doing
so
great.
much.
Thank you so much for asking us to be here.
Absolutely.
We're super honored and excited to be a part of your podcast.
We are greatly appreciative that you, number one, brought us through a gong ceremony last week?
Yeah.
It was last week today.
Last week.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then now we made this whole connection and thoughts become things. And we're sitting down and we're going to go hyperconscious. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the deeper parts of our stories and all that happy jazz.
Sure.
Great.
That sounds great. So Dennis and I have been married 34 years, and we are husband-wife yoga teaching team. So we teach yoga here in the Jacksonville area, all over the U.S., actually all over the world, because we do retreats and workshops and teacher trainings. And so we found yoga in the year 2000. So we were corporate people before that. And I'm sure we'll probably get into the little bit of that.
Yeah, and we're also musicians, but musicians of the type, I would say, ethereal. Ethereal musicians, meaning that we produce and generate meditative instrumental music as well as guided meditations for people. And so through that, we provide a lot of guidance for people to deepen their meditation and mindfulness practices as well.
So for those that are in the Hyperconscious Nation, actually after this, we are going to do, what was it that we're going to do?
We're going to do
A guided meditation.
A guided meditation?
Yeah.
So we're actually going to record that, and then that'll be up on the members site. And I'm actually really looking forward to that, other than the fact that I'm wearing jeans. But
I'm also looking forward to that as well, and I think that'll be... when we did the sound meditation,
Yeah.
what was it called? Qigong meditation? What was it called that we did?
Oh, it was a
Gong Bath.
gong bath.
Gong Bath.
It was actually this gong,
Yeah.
right here, and it was a gong bath. And basically it's called a bath because we literally bathe you in the vibrations of the gong. And the vibrations of the gong work on you on a cellular level, not only in your mind and your brain, but also throughout your entire body. So it's pretty epic.
It was epic. So it's so funny to tell a little story here. I had a client of mine drive 3 hours to see Kevin and I at the launch house, and he taught us about the different brain waves. So delta is like a meditative higher or lower frequency brain wave. Then you've got theta, then you've got alpha, then you've got beta, then you've got gamma.
Right.
Fast forward a few days, and we are doing a gong bath where I think you took us through a bunch of different vibrations. And for anyone who's not done a gong bath, my experience was that it was extremely freeing. I felt very relaxed, which for me is not always the case. I'm a little intense, but I highly recommend for all of our listeners to try that.
Awesome.
can I ask, so when we got in the car after, Alan said, did you have a moment where you didn't know if you were going to make it? Like, I don't know if it you hit that, and it resonated so highly. There was just so much energy that there was a minute where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But then as that kind of like swept over me, then it was like, oh, okay. Like I understand what's happening here. Do you know what is exactly happening when you're getting those feelings?
Well, the nature of the gong is that it's played in a certain way. So you don't just like grab the mallet and whack the thing. It's not like hammering nails or something like that.
There's technique.
There's technique to it. And what you do is you start out with a relatively low energy to really introduce this vibrational mix, if you will, to the brain. And then after about a minute and a half or 2 minutes, we increase the energy of the gong. And what happens is the brain, as that energy increases, the brain has no choice. The brain has to go where we guide you with the gong. I know that sounds a little weird. But what happens is vibrationally, there's what's called entrainment. So you know how when you're in like a club and you hear the music, and, you catch the beat.
Everybody's doing that.
And even now, people at home are catching this beat. Well, that's known as entrainment. What happens is with the gong and those vibrations, which are happening at very, very different mixes of frequencies, the cells within the brain and the cells within the body are kind of picking up the vibe. And so what happens is you lose your thoughts. And in a sense, you lose yourself. And that results in that feeling that you had where you said, I didn't know where I was, or I didn't know what I was. That's what happens in a gong bath.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm already super excited about this just because for those who just heard that, they're thinking, oh, wow, he knows a lot about this. They know a lot about this. But this is the polished product. It wasn't always this way, right? So can we go into how your story began when you were both working jobs that you weren't happy at? Very similarly to Alan and I feel like that's why we connected.
Yeah.
So can we jump into that?
Can I just
Flash back to whenever that was?
Can I just interject one thought?
Please do.
20 years ago, there is absolutely no way I would have ever imagined that I would be sitting next to a gong. I mean, in my previous consciousness, in my previous role in the corporate world, right?
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, there is no way I would be. First of all, I didn't even know how to spell yoga. Never mind know what yoga is. So.
Kevin still can't.
Right. I know it's 4 letters. I just haven't figured out which ones they are yet.
He's going to have to look it up when he writes the description.
That's so funny. Yeah, so just go back to when we found yoga. We were in corporate jobs, and Dennis was the vice president, and I was pretty high up the ladder as well. And we were in, a Fortune 500 company, making really good money, had really great titles, had a lot of people, reporting to us, and
we had all the fixins and trimmings of what success, especially success here in the United States in our culture.
Yeah.
What success was all about. Lots of frequent flyer points, lots of 401ks, bonuses,
big fancy house, nice car, everything.
Yeah.
We were successful.
Yeah.
We were
We were
successful.
supposed to be happy because we were successful, right?
She's doing air quotes, by the way, for the listeners. Yep.
So in the year 2000, we wandered into a yoga class, sort of by accident. We were long-distance runners, and we were at the Miraval Spa Resort in Tucson, Arizona on vacation.
An awesome place, by the way.
Yes,
Awesome
yes.
Tucson,
place.
Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were at the resort, and we were looking at the schedule of events, and we saw that they had a yoga class, and we didn't know anything about yoga. We didn't know anybody that was doing yoga. We had no really idea, except we thought it was kind of stupid. You might sit around and worship palm trees or something.
We
thought-
really had no idea. I
No
mean,
kidding.
We also thought maybe it would be a good stretch for the running. So we wandered into this yoga class. And like I said, we were long-distance runners, but kind of had big egos from these corporate jobs. And so we walk into this class, and it's a super powerful, anybody that knows about yoga, it was the Ashtanga primary series, which is a very difficult style of yoga, like one of the most challenging. And so in that class, we tried to put our bodies into all these crazy shapes. And of course, we weren't flexible. We didn't know what we were doing. And it was not exactly anything like what we thought it was going to be.
It was insane. I brought every bit of my male ego at
Oh,
the
yeah.
time.
Humbling
with me,
experience, right?
You know?
Yeah.
It's very humbling.
And they were like wrapping, parts of their body around other parts of their body. And it, like, geometrically to me, I'm an engineer by degree, so geometrically I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But I was pushing myself into it. That was the first lesson I learned. Do not force. And wow, I crawled out of there. And I said, Kathy, that's yoga?
Right. Totally different than what we thought.
Yeah.
And so we, like the next year, maybe we took another class or so. We found a more gentle beginner's class to start with, which was really the right place to start.
Yeah.
And so we started like becoming regulars at the yoga studio, and we were still running and still doing our corporate jobs. And we started really digging into, the postures and the breath and the meditation part, and then learning the deeper dimensions of yoga, the yoga philosophy, and all the stuff that most people really don't know is part of yoga.
Yeah, we were kind of drilling into, where did this come from? What is this?
Yeah. Where did it originate?
Yeah, where did it originate? And so as we started tapping into the lineage and the traditions of yoga, it became really fascinating. And the further we went back in time, the more that we seemed to connect with it. It was kind of interesting because we started kind of at the surface level, at the tip of the iceberg.
Yep.
And we realized there was so much under the surface that addressed so much about everything inside of and under our surface. And so we started then from that foundation or that framework, asking ourselves the really big questions. The really big questions we thought were, how much is the 401k growing?
Right.
How many frequent flyer miles do I have? But the really big questions are, who am I?
Oh, yeah. The identity question.
What am I? Am I happy?
Yeah, and one day I looked at Dennis and I said, here's the big question. Would you do your job if it weren't for the money? And I said, you have to answer me truthfully. And so he took a minute, like he had to really think, what's the truthful answer here deep in my soul, right? Not just, of course I'm happy, I would do this, And he looked at me and said, no, I would not do this job if it weren't for the money. And I said, well, then why are we here? Why are we doing this, right?
The pause was about truth within the context of expectation and culture.
Yeah.
Versus truth
Conditioning.
within myself.
Yes, exactly.
And that's one of the key elements of yoga. There's a series of, you could say, like the 10 commandments, if you will, of yoga. One of them is truthfulness. And you have to really dig in deep to yourself and ask yourself, okay, be real, be raw. Are you really happy? Can you be truthful about your answer? And that was the pause. Yeah. And it was from the pause that came, the need to really adjust.
This is, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you were going to go farther on that.
No, I was just doing my thing. I go, yeah.
Perfect. Right. All right. Good. So I have already so many questions jumping off the page in my own brain.
You will say that 10 more times.
Oh, yeah, at least.
Namaste.
You and I, all of us talked about, so first and foremost, all the listeners know this, I have a flashcard in my pocket that says the number one regret of the dying by Bronnie Ware is, I wish I had lived a life true to myself, not what others expected of me. I think that's kind of what you two just articulated about asking that question. First and foremost, amazing having the courage to ask him that, because you obviously were asking yourself that same question and questioning your answer. So for all the listeners out there, definitely ask yourself that question. Would I be at this job if it wasn't for the money, if it wasn't for the title, if it wasn't for the status? It's so hard because that's where your validation comes from.
Yeah.
So that leads to my next question. I wanted to ask you both this. We mention ego a lot. And I personally, I feel like I have a strong grasp on it, but I feel like you two definitely do. What is your take on what the ego actually is? And to bring context, last time we were here, you both mentioned that ego is still necessary. So can you please go into that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first of all, there's this, at first glance, the high altitude flyover of a conversation between, say, two yogis or two meditators or whatever would be to assume that the ego is a bad thing. But the ego is actually an essential thing. It's a part of our being. It's a part of who we are, is to have an ego. But the key is the relationship we have to the ego. And so when the relationship is too strong, or the relationship gets out of balance, Like, and I'll use myself as an example. I am my own best experiment, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I've run it all on myself. And I was so caught in my left brain, very driven by the intellect, very driven by the analytical side of me.
The engineer.
And because of that and my relative success with the intellectual side, it kind of got out of control, and I started to be able to tell myself questions, or tell myself stories, I should say, to convince myself and validate myself, validate the way I was walking and facing life. And so I realized the ego wasn't the problem as much as my relationship to my ego. So I would say, really, in a nutshell, Kathy, you elaborate on your perspective, but for me, it was all about letting it get out of control and allowing it to take me to a place where I was willing to follow my ego at the expense of others.
Wow.
And
That
at the
is-
expense of people I care and love for, not just people that I worked with, but even Kathy. You know, I was all about, you know, climbing the rung, taking the international flights, doing all those things, even at the expense of our happiness. And it wasn't until we found yoga and having spent a lot of time on the mat that I realized what the real cost, you know, what was the opportunity cost of letting my ego overrule me.
Can you give an example, if you don't mind? I appreciate you admitting that, by the way. That's very vulnerable of you. An example maybe of how you allowed your relationship with your ego to get too strong to where it was at the expense of Kathy's happiness?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I admire, I just want to say this about you two, is you've been married, you just told me, 34 years.
Yeah.
I think that falling in love is easy, sustaining it is challenging, in
Yeah.
my experience anyways. You guys obviously have done that in an incredible way. T-Mac, Terrence, basically that was the thing he said he admired about you both the most, is you two. I think he referred to you as swans.
Swans.
Which I think
Swans. Oh, that's cool. I love that.
Inseparable and in love.
I love that.
And perhaps you two's relationship helped you both come to a more centered place. But yeah, so what's an example of that you just mentioned there? Because I feel like that was a heartstring.
I think, I'll try not to bore you with too much of the gory detail, but I think at a young age, I'm not going to bore you too much with this, but at a very young age, I was somewhat of an introvert. I was the kid on the playground that, you know, wasn't so popular. And I think as a consequence of that, I was beaten down. Yeah, then later, like in high school, I realized I had this love of mathematics. And I channeled my growth and my success through that, and it became this like armor for me. And this armor for me became not just a defensive armor, it became kind of an offensive way to posture myself. And later, once we met and I became successful in different roles in my career, I was willing to do anything for my career. I loved Kathy, of course, but I would always take, you know, the next opportunity. And without so much as necessarily really tapping into what Kathy's needs were, I would end up, you know, I traveled 50 to 75% of my time overseas.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Please.
Yeah.
So here was Dennis's job. Monday morning, he'd fly to Brazil. He'd come home Saturday. I might see him 48 hours. The next Monday or Tuesday, he'd fly to Russia. He might come home 7, 10, 14 days later. He'd come home. He'd go to France. He'd go to Korea. He's Turkey, Germany, all over the world, every week a different country. So our time together was very limited. I was traveling too in my job, and every now and then we'd say, hey, I'm going to be in Italy this weekend. Hey, I'm going to be in France. Let's meet in Europe somewhere. It was kind of like that crazy life.
And there were aspects of that were obviously amazing and great in the sense that we would have these rendezvous, and of course they would be awesome in a sense. But overall, in my case, I wasn't hitting on all cylinders, you could say, from the motor point of view. You know, I wasn't really successful or good at all of it. I was somewhat like seeing a distorted view of the world, and my experience was really spread too thin. Also, unhealthy.
Yes. Physically.
Physically?
Physically.
So
yeah.
the travel was at the
Yeah,
and the
that's-
wealth creation was at
That's
the
got to beat on you.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
on a
It did.
plane
It did.
every week.
So
different
here's how
countries.
I was really doing it. I was in the morning. I was caffeinating heavily. I mean, a lot. In the evening, I was drinking to compensate for all the time.
high and then on the low.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was really using drugs to adapt my body to meet this schedule. So over a period of time, what happened is I ended up 40 pounds heavier than I am now at my worst. And I was on blood pressure medication because they found I was prehypertensive. And I was on Singulair because they said I was also asthmatic. So I was, this was not going to end well eventually.
Yeah, not sustainable.
Not sustainable.
Not sustainable.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
It was not hyper-conscious.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
It was hyper something, but it was not hyper-conscious.
Hyper-conscious.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, Kathy?
It was hard. Let me tell you. Many times he would leave for a trip and he'd walk out the door and I'd just start crying. And I tried to hide all that from him because I know he had a big job. He had places to be, people to meet with, things to do. And so I didn't want to be that wife that was like, why can't you stay home a week? I didn't want to be that person because I also had a job with responsibilities and I knew what that felt like, not on his level. So I would hide all that from him because I thought, I don't want to make him feel bad for leaving. It's his job, right? And then, over the years, I started expressing it a little bit. And then, of course, when we found yoga, we started talking more openly about the whole situation of not seeing each other. And we got married to be together. That's why you get married, hopefully, right?
Yeah, of course.
And we joke about the first 24 years of our life together. We were together, but we never saw each other. So now we're making up for lost time because we're together 24/7
All the time
now.
now.
Yeah. Good.
So,
Yeah.
exactly.
We were driving back last night, and we were both. So for the listeners, we had done an entire day of masterminding, working out, and podcasting, and it was probably 1:30 in the morning. At this point, we were 4 hours into our trip or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were just past go. Our brains were just not. But we had this super deep conversation about. Alan said, "Imagine driving a truck across the country, like that being your job every night."
Yeah.
And nothing against truck drivers. Geez, the fact that you were able to do that and stay awake and be lonely and just keep pushing forward, props to you. But it's like, I feel like we forget that you have, I'm going to do the thing, you have 90 years on this earth if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And most people are spending 60 of it working for somebody else just to pay the bills. So when you ask yourself those hard questions of, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I hopping on a plane and leaving my beautiful wife and she's crying? And how do you answer those questions and then follow through? Because a lot of people would say, I can't leave my job. I need the money. I need the 401k, the insurance. So how do you answer those questions and then do them?
Yeah. There's an element of yoga in one of the key texts of yoga where it talks about contentment. And it's right next to truthfulness.
Yeah.
This whole issue of contentment. And I think what we came to was to ask ourselves, how much is enough? And how much is enough to sustain a lifestyle that we want to have? And how much is enough to be able to support a lifestyle that we think we can live? Now, no one knows when the end game ends, right? That's part of the mystery of life. We celebrate our birthdays, right? We celebrate the new year. But do you know that every day you live and every year you live, you have lived through the anniversary of the day of your death? So what if today were the day of my death a year from now? Or what if today were my last day? What would I think? So it was through this rationale of understanding, life is precious, time is precious, relationships of loved ones is precious, and the impressions that we create upon the world is precious. So it's through that we found, or I came to, in my case, and also Kathy, this idea of what's enough.
Yeah, and like sometimes the alcoholic or the drug addiction person has to hit rock bottom. Not that we hit rock bottom, but you come to that realization, like, is this what I want the rest of my life to be like?
Yeah.
And then if not, change it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's what happened to us. And seems weird that we're on the top of the ladder when this realization comes. We're not at the rock bottom, in the gutter, drunk or something. It's like you're at the top and you're looking around going, is this really what I want? I got here, but is this what I want?
Well, addiction addictions can be of all sorts of sizes, types, flavors, colors, textures.
Yeah.
Certainly, those which relate to drugs and alcohol are extremely serious and are also physiologically serious.
Exactly.
But I was addicted to my job.
For sure.
Yeah.
And an addiction is, I think, part of the definition is when it has a negative impact on those around you.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my addiction for my career, my title, and my role had a negative effect on particularly Kathy. Although we were successful in making money and all these kinds of things, it was a negative impact. I was leaving a negative residual energy on her through my own actions, which I had intended to do. That's the weird thing, because I was consciously doing it, which is in a sense certainly not hyper-conscious, right? I was caught in a different kind of consciousness.
So I have a question about what you just said right there that I want to go into, and I know that you have a whole story around this. I actually have to go to the bathroom quickly, but I'm going to ask for the listeners and for everyone in this room. I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to leave.
Perfect.
You mentioned a very specific story. I've heard it before about your aunt, I believe, her aunt. So someone asked you.
Cousin.
Oh, my cousin.
Your cousin.
My
I'm
cousin.
sorry. Okay,
Yeah,
so this is
my
in the
cousin.
book as well.
Yeah.
But you were asked a hard question at a lunch meeting, I believe it was.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
You are so stuck in your current consciousness.
Yes.
Can you go into that story? And
Yeah,
I will be
glad
right
to.
back.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for that question. My cousin, Lori Tapp, a incredible person who, growing up, I was with my cousins quite often. She went on to get a double PhD in large animal veterinary medicine. So this is a woman who's extremely intelligent. She also went to an ashram in India and learned Qigong, and she became very insightful in the Eastern ways. And so we go up to Asheville and meet with her, and we sit down with her and her husband, and we're just chatting, and then I started sharing my commiseration of, work this, work that, work this, work that, and this is not that. And she said, Dennis, just stop. You are so stuck in your current consciousness. You just don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. And it was like, boom. That became like a tattoo on my brain, this idea of current consciousness. Because, first of all, I didn't even know what consciousness was. It was like after the first year of our exposure to yoga. Right. So I sort of thought I knew what consciousness was, but her term, current, implied I can change my consciousness. Oh, interesting. So that was kind of the foundation of looking at ourselves in another way too, from a consciousness point of view.
Yeah, at that time we were seeing our lives through the lens of the corporate job, right? We weren't looking at other possibilities. We were just saying, okay, here's my lens and it's through the corporate job, but if you get out of that current consciousness, you can see a whole world open up, right?
Right.
So you have to change the glasses sometimes, right?
As you were saying that consciousness, it just jumped into my head. To me, consciousness is your connection to reality. Like whatever, in the moment, it feels like you can't leave your job. That this is my reality. I have to be here.
Right.
There's no other way to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
We've all felt that. Again, hyperconscious came from me sitting in my house in New Hampshire by myself, depressed. I was making six figures. My girlfriend had just left me. Like everything from the outside before that looked great. But I hit rock bottom and I was like, I can't do this forever. This can't be what life is about. This isn't what happiness is. And I know most people aren't as happy as they say they are.
Right.
And that's why I want to dig behind and see like, what were the struggles? Where did you learn a lesson that made you change your life? Like that's what hyperconscious is. So you guys seem like one of the happiest couples I've ever had the pleasure of being around. You're always like touching each other, and you're very supportive of one another.
Yeah.
How do you navigate happiness when it comes to one another? And what do you think the most important things for a healthy, passionate, sustainable relationship are? I know I just stole your question.
Oh, you're golden. You're golden. I'm glad you asked it. I'm excited to hear it.
Well, it's interesting because most people would think the answer is going to come from a different place than the answer I'm going to give you. So I'm just going to give you that forewarning. But it was the yoga mat that actually helped us. We had a great marriage before that. But like we said, we were apart a lot. So, how great was it? We hardly saw each other, right? But then when you start spending a lot of time with each other 24/7 like we were, you really start to understand what a marriage is all about. And yoga has so many amazing principles in it. People don't even understand. They think it's just crazy postures on a mat and a workout, and then you leave. But all of these traditions of yoga have so many principles of how to live your life that it relates completely to marriage and completely to relationships with anyone. Yoga is about union. You with yourself, you with another, you with your divine spirit, or whatever you want to call it, right? So that's what yoga is all about, relationships. And so you start to learn these principles and you start to apply them in your life. Like Dennis was talking about contentment and truthfulness and some of these other things. And that's really where the rubber met the road, I think, for us when we started. We quit our corporate jobs. We started becoming yoga teachers, and we were together all the time. And all of a sudden, you're like, okay, we really have to work on this relationship now because it is real, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Totally right. I think that it's quite interesting, this thing called yoga. And it's not that, by the way, to come back just for a moment, we're not anti-corporate. Okay.
No, I didn't get that impression.
Again, it was our relationship
to it. Was too strong.
And unfortunately, we were high enough in the inner circle of that corporate experience that there were no alternatives but to leave. And it's not like I could say, well, hey, I'd like to just do this 3 days a week,
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of a thing,
Exactly.
A cute idea, Dennis, but that's not going to work.
Exactly, yeah.
So we just kind of strategically set ourselves up to do that. We also, though, wrote about it in the book. We felt that we had, through our teacher training modules and our workshops and our travels, that we realized that people were curious about, not that we had any particular answer to how a successful relationship should be, but they were curious about certain qualities, about what is it that made it work for us and how do we continue to sustain that. And as Kathy was talking, there's one word that we do mention in the book. There's a series of things that we mention, but one word came bubbling up, and that's reverence. I mean, if you bring the word reverence into your awareness, into your consciousness, and think about everything and everybody around you from a perspective of reverence, and you think about the relationship you have with someone you really care for, and look at it with a reverent eye,
changes everything.
it changes everything. It means that you can communicate clearly. You can come to compromise. It doesn't need to be blowing up and blowing out, right? It can be, no, let's really work through this. We have a difference of opinion here. Let's look at the two sides and understand the two sides.
And that there's a better solution somewhere in the middle of the two.
Yeah.
So the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
Right.
So you two are obviously, I have a theory. And the podcast listeners know this. If someone has a result that you want, they're either doing something differently than you or thinking differently than you, or both. It's very clear that you two think differently about relationships than most people. I also have another thing that I like to say. It's like, okay, so you and I were degreed engineers. And the whole world understands, the Western world in particular, if you want to be a good engineer, you have to study engineering.
Right.
What I wonder is like, okay, if I want to be successful, truly inwardly successful, I have to study it. If I want to be happy, I have to study it. If I want a successful, long-term, intimate, passionate relationship, I have to study it. So what is it that you guys mentioned in the book, practicing, and you define it actually, mastering something over and over and over again. So relationships are a process. We're a work in process. What do you two do differently that you think most relationships don't do? Because a lot of relationships, to be completely frank, and this has been on my radar my whole life, I don't see them holding hands all that much. I don't see them hugging and kissing, and and you can only picture, bring that to the bedroom, what's not going on there too, right? So the oneness you talk about is very clear with you two. What is it that you're doing differently and thinking differently that other couples probably aren't?
That's a great question. I love that you brought up what are you practicing, because that is one of my things that I've really been working on over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years. People say the word practicing and they think, practicing a musical instrument or practicing, to get something perfect, right? So something physical usually, or something that they're learning. But what are you practicing happens in the mind all day long. What are you practicing mentally? Just think about your thoughts and you say, what am I practicing right now? Am I practicing judgment? Am I practicing jealousy? Am I practicing envy or, grief or any of these things? What am I practicing? And once you kind of watch the mind and see what it's practicing all day long, you think, I don't want to get better at that. Look what I'm doing right now. I'm judging. Do I want to get better at that? No, not really. I want to get better at having compassion. I want to get better at empathy. I want to get better at understanding. I want to get better at some of these other positive attributes. So that is one thing that really happened for me, just to watch the thoughts and see what's really going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, whatever you practice, you get better at.
Yeah, fact.
Good or bad.
Good
Exactly.
or bad,
Exactly.
Right.
And even if you're trying to learn an instrument, there's a right way to practice and a wrong way to practice. Or if you're trying to practice a pose on a yoga mat, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it.
Fundamentals.
So it's about fundamentals. And this idea of bringing practice into the awareness inside of every moment is one that it helps you be within the present moment and live your life with that awareness, so that you start to maybe pause more instead of being so reactive. You respond mindfully instead of... See, I used to think, I'll have the quick answer because I'm intellectual and I can really, I'm pretty smart about all this stuff,
Flaring up for sure.
You see what I'm saying? But to sit back and pause, and maybe instead of leaning into life so much, maybe leaning back a little bit, and give it kind of room to breathe.
We had a very unique moment last night where, and this is all about, sometimes when you're honest with yourself about why you're feeling and expressing something the way you are, it kind of hurts. It's like Alan and I had a moment last night. Last night sounded weird. And that long pause. No. So I was feeling inner conflict. I wasn't feeling enough. I was feeling very self-conscious. And rather than expressing that and trying to figure out the root cause, I threw it at Alan. Like, yo, you made a mistake and that made me feel this way. No, you didn't make a mistake. I didn't allow myself to feel or express what I was feeling properly. And I like to use that as an example because, yes, we're hyperconscious. Alan and I are very hyperconscious, but I also make mistakes all the time. But the thing is, I want to be responsible for them. Because if I'm not responsible, I can't fix them.
That's right.
And I would have, if I didn't say, hey, I'm so sorry for the way I just reacted, I apologize. That was my ego. That was my reversion to my old self, my old mindset. Then I never would have had the opportunity to correct it. And then it would have just been well, this is how I am. So that's what mindfulness, that's what this is all about. We have this thing, we always say it's the machine. The machine says, you're not good enough. It's too early. It's too cold. You'll never make it. You're crazy. And hyperconsciousness, part of that is talking to the machine and saying the only reason you're the machine that you are is because I've let you prove me wrong before. I can hit the snooze button if I want, but I don't have to. It might be cold out, but I can still go for a run. So I'm hyped up right now. You guys are giving me all the good vibes.
Awesome.
I gotta pee.
And likewise.
I gotta go pee.
All right.
So he kind of just mentioned the silent observer that we talked about not long ago. You already kind of referenced it. We've kind of been referencing it this whole time.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I have on one of my flashcards that I wanted to ask you guys on my way in here, there's 5 of them, but one of them is about the silent observer, and it says, in quotes, an objective look. So if you were your own coach and you weren't yourself, right? So looking at yourself as if you weren't you, so unemotionalized, objective look. What is it that you two are practicing now that you'd like to shift?
What are we practicing now that we would like to shift?
Like to shift.
So this presupposes there's something you're working on or should be working on.
Right, right.
Well, I think, let me jump on that.
Go ahead.
I think, trying to always be a positive impact and a uplifter of the present moment comes to mind. It's one thing to be present, It's one thing to be like an active listener to someone. But can you then be present with them? I'm using that as an example.
Yeah.
And then uplift that moment. Can you smile at them? Can you compliment them? Can you make them feel better about themselves? And I think that doing that regularly
Yeah.
is a lot.
Yeah.
And I go back to what Kevin was talking about also. We're all human beings, and it's simply a fact that we're going to make some mistakes. We kind of fall back. And I think that part of the human experience should also include the idea that, cut yourself a break. Okay, I made a mistake, but I know the answer. See, the key I found in creating shift of the past and current shifts is to be able to be inside myself and observe myself. Being the observer is part of the big first lesson.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're always observing ourselves. We're always kind of leaning back, supported by our inner truth, is a way to think of it.
So, and I want your answer too. I don't mean to kind of cut you off, but I want you to go deeper on that because so what I'm getting from that is that you don't always have to be the uplifter. It's okay not to be. Is that what you're saying?
It's not okay.
It's not okay.
It's a case of sometimes you get caught up in the day, or you get caught up in the event or the situation. I can still, when I'm driving the car and I'm getting on the on-ramp and someone cuts me off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As much as I will lengthen my exhale, there's a temptation to want to respond differently.
Of course.
And I'll just say, okay, Dennis.
Yeah.
Pause.
Yeah.
First of all, this is not about you.
Of course not. They're having a bad day or whatever. Yeah.
So we have to deal with our humanness also. And I think that even some of the great teachers of yoga and meditation and mindfulness, they still fall back. And many cases they have fallen back.
Yeah.
But they can work themselves back too.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think for me, the one thing we touched on earlier is instead of responding like you always respond quickly, and maybe the words come out that you wish you could retract, is to just take a moment before you respond, because pausing before you respond in our society sometimes is not seen as a good thing. People are like, oh, she doesn't have the answer. She's quiet just a second too long. But in reality, if you pause for that extra second, your response will be way better.
Yeah.
It'll be a response instead of a reaction.
Yes.
Right.
Because when we react the same way over and over and over again to certain situations, we create these grooves in our brain. It's called neuroplasticity.
Yes.
And
yes. All the listeners are going,
Yes.
that's
and in Sanskrit, it's called samskaras. These are grooves, these are pathways in our brain that we go back to over and over and over again, because it's so simple to just jump right back in that same path, that same groove that you've made before, because it's so familiar to you.
Yeah.
But when you can stop making that groove with that bad habit or that reaction that you always have, and you can make a new groove that's better, it's that groove to stop for a second and make sure you're answering the way you really want to answer, with your heart, with mindfulness, with compassion.
So clearly you guys are very in touch with your inner selves, your thoughts, your intentions. Like, you guys live on purpose. You don't live by accident, right? Like, a lot of people live by accident.
Yeah,
and going back to the relationship thing that we were talking about earlier, Alan and I did an episode, this was months ago, like a long time, probably in the 40s. This was a while ago. But the one thing that most people end up in that they don't prepare for is a relationship.
Yeah.
You're most likely going to end up in a relationship by default, one that you didn't design, one that you don't necessarily desire.
Right.
But people will say, well, it's better than being alone. Or I live with a person. I can't get rid of them. I can't break up with them or whatever it may be. I work with them, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to relationships and you guys, how do you practice your communication? Like, what is your communication on a daily basis like? Like, do you have check-ins where it's like, I feel this way, I feel this way? Like, how does that look?
And how do you not react, like get triggered during that? Because that's another, great question.
Well, let me start by saying we've been doing this practice for a few years. Every morning, Dennis wakes up before I do. Every morning when I come out of the bedroom and I find him, the first thing I say to him is, good morning, I love you, I'm so glad you're here. And this is the most beautiful way to start your day. You can do it with your dog if you live alone, or your cat, or you can do it with your, someone that you love, whoever it is. You can do it with people at work. Skip the I love you part.
That could weird them out.
Good morning, I'm so glad you're here. But just acknowledging that you see this person, you love this person, you're glad they're there. It like sets the tone for the whole day. It's like, oh, I feel appreciated first thing in the morning. I feel appreciated. I feel loved.
Yeah.
It just sets you up for a great day, right? That's the way we start every single day.
Yeah, we learned this. We were in a mindfulness immersion out in Esalen in Big Sur, California, with Dr. Shauna Shapiro. And she wrote a blurb for our book. We get to know
that's
her.
why I recognize the name.
She's awesome. I mean, anything Shauna Shapiro, awesome.
Love it.
So she shared this technique, and she's actually writing a book about it, about the good morning, I love you practice. And it is so powerful. Even in the workplace, when you say to somebody, good morning, I'm so glad you're here, it like shifts the energy. You mean you're glad I'm here? What do you mean you're glad I'm here? It really, it's an experiment worth trying,
Absolutely.
I encourage your listeners to just try that. Never mind the way to do it with, say, your spouse or partner, because it is extremely powerful that way.
And we've really been blessed. We've never had a fight. He's never slept on the couch. We've never, out of 34 years of marriage and 36 years together, we disagree about things because we're two people. We have two different opinions, of course,
Absolutely.
right? We don't have one brain. We have two brains.
Oh, yeah.
We look at things differently, right?
Yeah.
But we talk it out, and I'll say, well, why do you think about it that way? Well, I think about it this way. And then, you compromise. You figure it out together. Sometimes he gets his way. Sometimes I get my way. Sometimes we come to a point in the middle. It's all good,
Yeah.
right?
Interesting. The yin and the yang.
Yeah. Yin and
Masculine,
yang. Yep.
feminine, polarity. I love it.
It is. It is.
So
There's a little bit of both in both.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we
Yeah.
all have both
Yeah.
within us. One's just stronger than the other. I would,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think back on that reverence thing I was just talking about a little bit ago, is I think the other thing that I've learned is to see myself in others and to see others inside myself. And know that when Kathy's got an opinion, it's an opinion that I should take very seriously because it's a reflection of what I might also think. Okay. So, for example, let's say we had on the table the number 9. From your point of view, it looks like a 9, but from my point of view, it looks like a 6.
Yeah.
We're
It's-
both right.
Yeah.
I mean, am I going to start a war over the fact that you think it's a 9?
Yeah.
If we just slightly shift our angle and shift our perspective, we can see, well, now I see why you guys think it's a 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
See-
9s are not so bad, So, this is the way that Kathy and I think. We see the 2 sides or the 3 sides of a given thought. And I guess we've been blessed since we got together. It was before yoga, pre-meditation, all that stuff. Pre-meditation. No, I didn't mean that. But it was before all of that, We just had a natural way of sort of communicating that way.
Interesting. So you said that you used to be very upset when he would leave.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I didn't learn about that, by the way,
Exactly,
until after.
So I have a quote that all the listeners know. I say this all the time, and believe it or not, this is my own. The suppression of self-expression leads
Yeah.
to depression.
Ooh, yeah.
And I think that because you wanted to be a great supportive wife of his career and his dreams,
Yeah.
you suppressed yourself and or didn't feel
Yeah.
comfortable to communicate the
Right.
truth, either to yourself or to him.
Right.
What can you bring the listeners to make sure that they are expressing themselves, even if it is in the gym or in yoga or with their friends or family or a therapist or on a podcast, whatever it is? I truly believe that we need to express our truth in whatever form possible in order to be happy, healthy, productive humans. You two both seem like you do that all the time, to be honest.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And expressing ourselves can come in many different ways, right? One other thing we learned along our path was before you say anything, run it through the 3 gates of speech. Have you heard about this?
No, but I'm so pumped right now.
3 gates of speech. So the first gate, before you say it, is it true? The second gate, before you say it, is it kind?
Oh,
The third gate, before you say it, is it necessary?
interesting.
So there's a lot of things that are true, but are they kind and necessary?
Wow.
Right? So, yes, we want to express ourselves in some way where it can be truthful, kind, and necessary.
You just eliminated at least 20% of the things I said.
Yeah.
Necessary one.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it would be a wonderful rule for, let's say, most politicians to adopt.
Oh, right?
Yes,
My
yes.
goodness. Yeah,
And then
that's
the
a...
fourth one, the fourth gate,
Yeah.
which is Dennis kind of already implied, does what you're about to say, uplift the moment.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you learn those things, you probably talk a lot less because you're like, oops, I don't think this is really kind. It might be necessary, but it's true, you know, and then you start thinking about these things before you say them.
Well, isn't the goal, the problem is, I think a goal, if Alan and I are arguing and there's a center point, I'm trying to pull him over to my side. He's trying, if we're arguing, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to pull me to his, but the resolution should be we need to figure this out so we can both stand in the middle somewhere.
Well, we both should get better from the interaction.
Yeah.
We should
Right.
both
Yeah.
learn
Yes.
something.
That's why that
Yeah.
necessary one really jumped off, because it
Yeah.
could be like,
Yeah, it
we
could
could
be
be
over
arguing,
nothing, yeah.
and I could be, well, remember the time you didn't bring me a donut? Yeah, so
Yeah, right.
that's it. That's the end of the conversation.
Right. Was that
Interesting.
necessary to drag up the
Right?
past?
No,
right?
not at all.
Yeah.
That's the only
Yeah.
leverage I felt in the moment, probably.
Those 4 gates are unreal. Those are amazing.
Yeah.
Do they come from a book? Is there like something?
Yeah,
Where did you
they-
guys get
they
that?
come back from, there's a religion called Quakers. And Quaker is also a religion of the Friends, they call it. So the last place in history I could find it was from the Quakers. And actually, I'm from North Carolina, and I think some of my lineage is from Quaker. That's why it really resonated with me.
No kidding.
So it's just something that they started. But I think it goes way, way back beyond that. I just haven't been able to Google anything further than that.
Interesting.
Can we talk about meditation?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I think a lot of people have a skewed view maybe of meditation. When I first heard about it, I assumed that like if I didn't go somewhere else and forget about everything that I was thinking, I wasn't meditating.
Yeah.
So can you give maybe like a general outline of how to start? Because I think starting anything can be overwhelming, right?
Yes, yes.
Especially when it's dealing with the mind. So can we go over maybe how to start, what to expect, and like the do's and don'ts? So don't freak out if you don't get changed overnight, kind
Yeah.
of deal.
One of our workshops, as a matter of fact, is called Unraveling the Mysteries of Meditation and Mindfulness. And we start out with basically the mysteries or the misunderstandings, the myths of meditation. And one of the ideas is that you have to stop your thoughts. Well, the problem you have with that is we generate 50 to 70,000 thoughts per day. That's about one every second and a half. And so by definition, we're not going to stop them, but through meditation, we shift our relationship with them. So that's really where meditation takes us. It takes us into a way of changing the way that we relate to our thoughts, but we're not going to stop the thoughts necessarily.
Right. Another myth is you have to go someplace special. You have to sit like this. You have to do something with your hands that's fancy.
And wear some special clothes.
Or maybe you have to have someone teach it to you because certainly you can't learn on your own, right? And these are all giant myths of meditation. Or you have to do it for a certain amount of time, certain time each day. All those are myths. You can meditate anytime. You can take one mindful breath, and that's meditating. Like, you can do meditation anytime, anywhere. Osho was a big meditator guy. He came to the States a long time ago, but he said there's over 100 ways to meditate, and that is absolutely true. You don't have to sit still. You can walk and meditate. You can do labyrinth walking meditation. You can dance and meditate. You can run and meditate. You can
In fact, in our book,
Yes.
we have a whole section about learning style as a means to determine which way among the universe of meditation types and methods, which way to maybe start that's more compatible to you.
I love that. I love
And
that.
based on what you need most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're all different. So me sitting like this, in fact, I'll explain, one thing that I tried when I first found yoga was this idea of sitting, like Kathy is sitting right now, and putting my fingers together and just observing my breath. For me at that time, my head was exploding. It's like, it's not just monkey mind. I had the whole zoo in my mind. So for me, that was an inappropriate way to meditate because I was a different kind of learner than that one.
I love that.
Right.
So
Yeah, so in our book we talk about if you're a visual learner, or an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. There's 3 different types. So if you're a visual learner, you probably know that because you learn things by reading. You like charts and graphs. You're the one that walks into the room and sees the picture askew on the wall and you want to go straighten it out, right? So, visual learners want to do something where they involve the eyes to meditate. So you can do candle gazing, fire gazing.
Yeah.
You can do things that, take the eyes into consideration. Now, auditory learners, they're people that learn information by listening. They usually play a musical instrument pretty easily, or they'll pick up a foreign language pretty easily, or they just like to hear music. If you're an auditory learner, then you might try meditating with music or a guided meditation with sound, something that involves the ears. And then the third type, which is less than 5% of the population, is the kinesthetic learner, where you actually learn by doing. You don't learn by reading or listening. You have to
That is
do
me
it.
for sure.
That's you.
Yes.
And these people are people that usually can't sit still.
Yeah, I struggle.
Yes,
Yep.
you struggle. So the best way for you to meditate is do something that involves movement, because that's best for you. So walking meditation or running or doing something that involves moving.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I remember back when I learned the most. I pride myself on my ability to retain a lot of information and then extrapolate a lot from that. And maybe that's the engineer in me. But when I was in show prep, I would have YouTube on my phone, listening to a seminar. I would have it in my earbuds, and I'd be walking. And I swear I was doing all 3, and I could retain so much. It's not even funny. And then if you add writing to that,
Yes, yes.
instead of walking, it would be writing. So
Yeah.
when you combine all 3, I think it's powerful for the listeners. Kevin hit his watch.
Yes.
So we're running out of time. And there's one thing that I needed to make sure that we got to, other than the questions we always ask our guests. Your book is called Everything Matters. Now, the personal development industry, this is a personal development podcast, is very, very keen on showing shiny objects and then saying, here's the 3 secrets to how you get it. And it really breaks my heart because it's usually a lot more than any 1 or 2 things. And you cannot want the shiny object without also wanting the process to attain it, whether it's your physique or your dream job or your lifestyle or whatever that is. So your book is called Everything Matters, and I absolutely love that. That doesn't necessarily mean everything matters equally. What is your take on Everything Matters? Because in the book it says right on the cover, it's not what you think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, Everything Matters came in meditation. And it was after a long time of practicing yoga and meditation and so forth that this idea came to us that within every moment, as we talked about earlier, we're practicing. Well, every single thing that you do in that moment, let's say every action, every reaction, or lack of action, actually has an effect. It's the cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, or the law of
Newton's third law,
attraction.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Exactly. It's all of that. So we realize that if you bring this awareness that everything matters into the present moment, then ownership exists where it belongs.
Yeah.
The contrast or the opposite thought would be, and we've had these discussions with people before who don't necessarily agree with us, that, well, nothing matters. Nothing matters here.
Dislike strongly.
And to me, that is irresponsible. It's an irresponsible, arrogant way to live. Because being alive has an impact on everybody. It has an impact on the ecosystem, on the planet, on your friends, your colleagues, everybody. So this idea that everything matters is a general overarching lesson that we learned through really 18 years. There are elements of practice that fall underneath it that we wrote in our book called Reflections. And these are things that you can do on, a daily basis or whatever to kind of hone in on that. But everything matters is the overall lesson that we learned, and it was a really good one to shape us.
Yes.
I want to interject super quickly. So the Hyperconscious podcast, for all the listeners out there, Kevin and I always talk about how being hyperconscious is hard. It's more challenging. And I think one of the reasons it's more challenging is what you just said. If you really realize that ownership is on you and that everything you do and don't do has a ripple effect on everyone and everything around you in the universe and the world, all of that. It's more challenging because then you have to own your mistakes. You have to own when things don't go right. And the part that you play in that. So I always say that ignorance and apathy are the greatest enemies. If you look at any human suffering, any real root cause of suffering where human beings are suffering, usually there's a lot of ignorance, which is not knowing, or a lot of apathy, which is not caring. And if you think about what this podcast is, what we're all doing right now, we all care deeply, and we all are trying to be less ignorant. Right? We're trying to know more. And so it's a beautiful thing, but it is a harder road, and I think that's important. I definitely want your take on Everything Matters as well.
Well, in my case, it's that, even the small stuff, everything matters, right? How you keep your house, how you, if everything is clean and neat and tidy. I mean, if you look in someone's world and you go into their home, and I know people like this, and everything is cluttered, everything's a mess, they can't find anything, they're constantly losing everything, then the mind is cluttered. So your space, your environment reflects what's going on in your mind, right? So everything matters in all parts of your life. Your speech, how you live, how you keep your residence wherever you are, how you interrelate to everybody else. It all matters.
What you say and don't say. This is unbelievable. And for the listeners, too, this house is gorgeous.
I was just about to say.
Go ahead.
I know you're just seeing this spot, but this is what everything looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
I was peeking around, and I was like, my goodness.
Pardon my French, but you should all see the shit show we brought in here. Our consciousness we're shifting their consciousness to more messy. I got to get my life together. Yeah,
Sure. It's getting there. So we both have questions that we ask every guest, and then we'll talk more about the book and where people can find you and how they can come practice with you guys, obviously.
Okay.
It'll go for both of you, separate answers.
Okay.
So we're given this chance to live and exist and impact and affect others and change the course of history if we so choose. What do you want to do? I'm going to start with Kathy. What do you want to do before you die? Like, what do you hope to accomplish?
Wow, that's pretty easy for me to answer.
I love it.
Being a yoga teacher, just expose more people to the concepts of yoga, the deeper dimensions of yoga, the real yoga, not just the workout part. If someone comes up to me after class and they say, oh, that was a great workout, I get a little offended because that's not my goal, is to give you a good workout. My goal is to give you a work in so that you start to understand what's going on inside of you, right?
Interesting.
But I smile at them if they say they had a good workout, and I go, you'll get it sooner or later.
Yeah.
It's a work in, really, not the workout.
Didn't pass the second gate.
That's right. Yeah, so that would be my answer.
Love it.
Dennis?
I would like to remind people of Einstein's quote, one of his many, but the one that I really tap into is that energy is everything, and everything is energy. Match the frequency of the life you want, and you will get that life. It's not physics. I mean, it is physics. It's not psychology or sociology. It's physics. It's mathematics.
Interesting.
So define the frequency of the life you want, match it, and you will get it.
Interesting.
Because
Powerful.
everything is energy. Everything vibrates, just like this gong vibrates.
How do you feel right now? Because when we were on the way over here, we were both. I was like, I need a coffee. I am exhausted. But from the second we sat down, it is the energy. I feel great. I feel like I could run a marathon right now. I'm
Awesome.
not tired at all.
Awesome.
I'm sure after this I will crash. But to your point, it really is that. I want what you have. I want the peace of mind you have. I want the connection you're able to get with people. I always feel connected when I'm around you guys. That's what I want. So I have to raise my level to that, or this won't work. It just simply won't work. So, sorry.
No, you're good.
Interrupted your question.
And if you ran a marathon, that might be bad after that stuff.
Yeah, no, I would probably die. I'm not saying I'd make it.
we did a 400-meter sled push challenge with some
Yeah.
ex-Marine veterans 2 days ago, and Kevin may or may not have.
Don't do it after bronchitis. Don't. Yeah, I was puking. I thought I was gonna die.
Yeah.
But I'm alive. So
Yeah, we're here. We're
we're
good.
here.
So my question is first of all, the Einstein stuff. I just started studying Einstein probably 3 or 4 months ago, and to be honest, it's really good when you're like, why in the hell didn't I do this sooner? Everyone's been talking about this guy, like arguably the smartest quote unquote guy in the history of the world, and I just never picked up his damn book. So The World as I See It by Einstein is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But so my question is kind of on that same thing you just said with energy. So I believe we grow, we evolve, we adapt, we change, right? We all are constantly a work in progress. But I believe there's a part of us, I wear this North Star around my neck, and I've probably talked to you guys about it briefly last time we were here, because I always mention it. But this is the part of me that is, the North Star is the brightest star in the sky. It's unwavering, it's constant, it doesn't change, and it's a guide. So I call it my true north. It's my purpose. It's living into my purpose every moment of every day. And I believe as much as we grow and change, there's a part of us that never changes. What about you, Kathy first, never changed?
Never changed. That's a good one. I think growing up, I had an amazing grandmother who instilled in me, taught me this, told me this line over and over and over again as a kid. You can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. So I believed that because she told me that all the time. And, when we left our corporate jobs, I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to be yoga teachers? Like, how is that going to work, But you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it, right? And you put your focus on it, and you put your energy there. Where your energy goes, everything else goes. So for me, I would say that would be it.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, that was good.
right. How do you, yeah. Well,
No, I think.
How do you follow that?
It was the first thing that came to my mind is I think back. Every one of us has that light inside of us. Yet, I'll quote Deepak. Okay, Deepak Chopra.
Deepak Chopra. Oh yeah.
We had the opportunity to see him speak here in Jacksonville, and he said, "You're not a noun; you're a verb." Human beings. We think of ourselves as this noun, right? But the truth of the matter is, we're in a constant state of change. Not only is everything changing around us, all of that energy is changing, but every cell of our body is changing. Every 7 years, we get a new body, completely new cellular structure,
100%,
everything. So, although that's all happening, deep inside my heart, there was always the same flickering flame. And in yoga, for you yoga people out there who are familiar with this, of course, there's the heart center, the heart chakra center. But inside of the heart chakra center is another chakra, another center called Hridaya chakra. And that's where that light, the cave of the heart, that's where that light is. And it's inside of all of us. And I'm so thankful to know that the light was always there. I didn't know it, but it's always been there and it always will be. And my light is her light. It's your light. It's all of our light. It's the sunlight. And so that's, part of...
Moonlight in the North Star.
Yes, exactly. We are the stars.
I appreciate you guys brightening both of our lights.
Absolutely.
I feel this was definitely one of my favorites. I've been saying that every episode. Every episode I've been getting happier and happier, and I feel the connection here, and I'm greatly appreciative of you guys.
We're very humbled. Yes. I mean, honestly, as soon as we got to know you guys, we could feel this resonance.
I appreciate that.
But when we learn that you're all about hyper-consciousness and your definition, your way of life, the way that you're touching people's lives with this podcast humbles us to be a part of it.
For sure.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. So let's talk about how you are touching people's lives.
Okay.
So for those listening, I'm showing their book to the cameras, but we already talked a little bit about Everything Matters. You can tell us more about that, how it came up, why it came up, how it's going to help people, and then especially where can people get the opportunity to be taught by you? Where can they get a work in with you? Where can they do all these things with you? Because we've been lucky enough to have one ceremony already. We're going to do another one soon. It's like, I feel
can't
very
wait.
blessed that we're able to be doing this with you guys. So where can other people get the same experience?
Okay, great.
Well, we
So-
love to travel, so we will come. We will travel to various places and
Right on.
destinations.
Right, so let's start with the book. So
Yes.
the book is called Everything Matters. It's available on Amazon. You can buy it in print version. You can also buy it in Kindle version. And we've just finished the recording of it, and it's being mastered now. And so next month, hopefully, the audio version on Audible will be available.
And we've expanded the book a little bit.
Yeah,
On
We've
Audible?
added music to the
Oh,
book.
Nice.
yeah.
And so we've also put in another bonus track, which is a Gong Bath
Nice.
meditation
Love that.
On the
Interesting.
back
I'm gonna
end of
need
the
to-
book.
on the back end of the boat.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to get
Yeah.
a signed copy of that audio file.
But to find us, it's yogawithdennisandkathy.com. Very creative name we came up with, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
We
right.
figured the last thing the world needs is another name for yoga. Right.
Yeah.
And we love all types and styles of yoga. And so we said, well, call it what it is. It's yoga with Dennis and Kathy.com.
Right.
Right.
.com.
So we do about, I don't know, we travel about 12 to 15 days out of the month.
Nice.
Teaching yoga all over the U.S. and, like I said, international retreats. And so if you want to come with us to Costa Rica in April, we're leading a
Please.
retreat there.
Wow.
It's April 6th through 12th in Costa Rica.
Teaching in Bali in
In
March.
Bali in March. That one's sold out, unfortunately. So we have a lot of things on our schedule, and the website is always up to date and always has our current schedule on there. So you can check us out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, and all of our music and guided meditations, most of them, are available on our SoundCloud page, which is easy to get to from yoga with DennisandKathy.com. It's just click the little orange button next to SoundCloud, and everything is free, streamable, and downloadable.
Nice.
I love it. So we will actually link both of those in the YouTube and iTunes as well. And you guys, if you follow us on SoundCloud, it'll be easy enough to hop over
Yep.
and get on their page as well.
The last thing that I want to say, and this kind of bubbled up as you would put it, while you were mentioning the energy and then also the light within you. There's a quote that I always think of, and this is part of my purpose. My purpose gets a little more specific than this, with a prayer that I do every single day. But the one for everyone in this room and for the theme of this podcast here today, I want my light to shine so bright that it can be seen even from the darkest places, especially when all of the lights go out. And I think that whatever that light is within you, if you ask yourself out there right now, like, what about me never changed? And you find your gift, your purpose, your reason for being, and then you really allow that light to be a part of every action you do and every action you don't do, right? Like, if it's unkind, stop saying it, Alan. Even if it's for someone else's quote-unquote best interest, right? But yeah, I just wanted to share that with everyone. Thank you both so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
Beautiful.
appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
so
You guys
much.
are awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're all awesome, too.
Yes.
So we are going to break this down. We are going to rearrange the room a little bit, clean up so it's not, as Alan said, a shit show.
Oh, yeah.
And we will talk to you guys later. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it, because we definitely enjoyed recording it.
Yes, we did. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening to another episode of the Hyper Conscious Podcast.
Going hyper-conscious will absolutely change your life, because if you understand why something is the way it is, now you have the power to change it. If you going hyper-conscious with us has changed your life in any way, please share this episode with one of your friends, because the more people that go hyper-conscious, the better this world's going to be for everybody.
And if you would kindly leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would help us make more people hyper conscious, and we would be greatly appreciative.
Thank you.
Bye.